Washington Commanders followed up a very highly touted NFL draft class with a top 10 ranked undrafted free agent class. And there are 3 of those guys that I'm looking at with better than normal odds to make the active roster. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day every day. And don't forget that you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast. And you can continue this conversation with me by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders today and sign up. From there, you will get news, analysis, one-on-one conversations, inside information with me via text message. No hashtags, no apps, no filters, just your phone, my phone. You text me, I text you. A lot of cool stuff going on over there. So go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders and text me today. I am David Harrison, credentialed member of the media covering the Washington Commanders for CommanderGameDay.com, a part of Sports Illustrated's FanNation, here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And everydayers, I appreciate your continued support for the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers, you get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. On today's episode, we are going to talk about 3 undrafted free agents that I think we need to watch closely as we get ready for rookie minicamp this weekend and then on into training camp. But before we start with those 3 specific prospects, I want to take a look at the entire undrafted free agent class for the Washington Commanders that was ranked in the top 10 by Thor Nystrom of Fantasy Pros. So for those who might be a little bit unfamiliar with Thor Nystrom does a lot of homework, a lot of research on all the draft prospects, on many more draft prospects than I do. You'll never hear myself call me a draft analyst, because for me to be a draft analyst and to have a quote unquote big board and all those things, you got to study at least 200-300 prospects. There's 257 prospects drafted this year in the NFL draft, and if you didn't study at least almost all of them, if not more than all of them, then to me you're not a full-blown what I would call draft analyst. Guys like Dane Brugler, Daniel Jeremiah, Thor Nystrom. So Thor Nystrom, what he does every year, not only does he do the grades and the rankings of the draft classes and all that stuff like everybody does, and for what it's worth, he gave the Washington Commanders draft class an A, like several people did. He also ranks the undrafted free agent classes and kind of lists some things about those guys. For the Washington Commanders this year, they ended up number 6th overall. So they ended up with the 6th ranked undrafted free agency class here this year, according to Thor Nystrom of Fantasy Pros. Number 1 overall is Kansas City Chiefs, so that's a lot of fun. Everybody's going to love to see that. Number 2 was the New York Jets. 3rd was the Minnesota Vikings. 4th was the Seattle Seahawks. 5th was the Denver Broncos. And then again, the Washington Commanders come in number 6. And the top guy in that class is Chigozie Anusiem, cornerback out of Colorado State, who comes in on Thor Nystrom's big board, ranked 231. So again, a draftable player, because again, 257 prospects drafted. So if he's ranked, 257 or better, then basically he has a draftable grade according to Thor Nystrom. The second best player in the Commanders undrafted free agent class, Tyler Owens, who came in ranked 237th overall. So another draftable player. Safety number 19 on Thor's board, Texas Tech prospect. Michael Wiley, number 239, was also on that board, running back from Arizona. So there's your 3 draftable players that the Washington Commanders signed as undrafted free agents, according to Thor Nystrom. So again, Chigozie Anusiem, cornerback out of Colorado State, Tyler Owens, safety out of Texas Tech, Michael Wiley, running back out of Arizona, 231, 237, 239. Respectively. Now you have some players after that who were outside the 257, but pretty close. Sam Hartman, quarterback out of Notre Dame. He was probably the biggest name that I think, like nationally, that the Commanders signed. One of the first ones that was kind of announced that he was signing with the Washington Commanders as an undrafted free agent. He came in 263rd on Thor Nystrom's big board, so right outside, 6 spots outside of 257. So still within that draftable range, obviously, right, but not quite in the draftable window, I guess you could say. And then Colson Yankoff, number 264, so right after Sam Hartman on the board, listed as a fullback, UCLA, coming out of UCLA. He's an interesting guy. AJ Woods, cornerback out of Pittsburgh. So from the Pittsburgh Panthers, ranked 299. So another top 300 guy, right? So that's good. So you've got, what does that make? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players in Thor's top 300 list, which is very good. And then 334 overall, Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saints, wide receiver out of Georgia, who's an interesting prospect. Austin Jones was number 387 on Thor's big board coming out of USC. He's a running back whose comp is Craig Reynolds. And if you watched the Detroit Lions season of Hard Knocks, I think maybe Craig Reynolds is an interesting comparison for a guy to make. So that certainly is interesting there. Ben Nickel, safety out of Iowa State, number 404. And then Kenneth Horsey, number 429 on Thor's big board, offensive tackle out of Kentucky. And Thor wrote, so he said, quote, the Commanders followed a smash draft with the number 6 UDFA class. That crop includes 6 prospects I had ranked in my pre-draft top 300. And something that he mentioned specifically about guys like Colson Yankoff, Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saints, and Ben Nickel are that all 3 of those signings are very intriguing because all 3 of those guys were very important and core special teams players to their college teams. They're very big, impactful special teams players. And obviously, when you're talking about undrafted free agents, that's typically where an undrafted free agent, they have to make their money first in the NFL, is on special teams. So those 3 guys specifically, again, Yankoff, Rosemy-Jack Saints, and safety Ben Nickel, having that special teams pedigree coming into it certainly gives them a little bit of a leg up. And I think when you look at a team that's in the transition phase that the Washington Commanders are currently, with so much roster turnover happening from last year to this year with Adam Peters and the new coaching staff coming in, this is kind of a unique year and a unique situation for these UDFAs, because especially these guys who are kind of highly pursued by other NFL teams, this is really your opportunity. I think this is the best opportunity, I would say. This is a team that kind of looks like it's more willing to take a chance on a UDFA this season than maybe any other season. And maybe, again, if there's a player that they inherited from the old regime that they maybe don't necessarily believe in fully or completely see as part of their future plans, they're willing to roll the dice on you and your special teams potential and your potential on defense or offense, whatever position it might be, to bring you on the active roster, or at least keep you around on the practice squad. And there's 3 guys from this list specifically that I think have a better than normal, I would say, chance of making the active roster for the Washington Commanders. And shout out to Insider Merle, who was texting me about this just yesterday. I decided to do a full-blown episode on this topic specifically because I think it's very interesting. And with, again, rookie camp coming up, you never know who might be able to shine from this group. And those 3 guys are Chigozie Anusiem, the cornerback out of Colorado State, I think for obvious reasons, but we'll talk about them anyway. Safety Tyler Owens out of Texas Tech. And then one that maybe a little bit of a flyer, maybe a little bit of a reach on my end. I'm willing to accept that, but I'm very, very intrigued by this player, UCLA fullback Colson Yankoff. Those are the top 3 guys on this list for me. We're going to dive into each of them coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now at FanDuel, new customers, you can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 that you can then spend on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. All you got to do is place one $5 bet. It wins, you win. The Minnesota Timberwolves are looking to take a 3-0 lead over the Denver Nuggets. And because of their 2-0 lead over the Denver Nuggets, they are minus 700 favorites to win that series and plus 290 second best favorites to win the NBA Finals. The Boston Celtics are still the favorites at plus 100 odds, and the Nuggets odds have plummeted from second best all the way down to plus 1,500. So no matter what you think is going to happen there, baseball, hockey playoffs, whatever it is, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. Again, place that $5 bet, win that $5 bet, and you get $150 in bonus bets with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thanks again for making Locked On Commanders your first listener, first view today and every day, everydayers. Thanks again for coming through on a regular basis like you do. Come back tomorrow. We'll have one more episode before we enter rookie minicamp this weekend, and we will have a couple of episodes planned for the rookie minicamp. The Washington Commanders have been nice enough to let us in on Friday and Saturday. We'll hear from players on Friday. We'll hear from Coach Quinn on Saturday. So I do plan on doing an episode following each day of rookie minicamp. In the meantime, if you're watching Fox Sports and ESPN on your television all day and find that you have to keep turning it down when all the shouting begins, make the move over to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all of the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Continuing our conversation with the undrafted free agents here, the Washington Commanders have signed again the number 6 ranked class in the NFL, according to Thor Nystrom of Fantasy Pros. And we're going to talk about 3 undrafted free agents that the Commanders have signed that I do believe have, like I said, what I would put it as better than normal odds to make this year's active roster, starting with cornerback Chigozie Anusiem out of Colorado State. Thor Nystrom's number 231st ranked prospect on his personal big board. And of him, Thor wrote, quote, "The Commanders won the cornerback Chigozie Anusiem bidding war with $350,000 in total guarantees. Per NFL.com's Tom Pelissero, quote, half the league wanted Anusiem after he went undrafted, end quote. Anusiem broke up 11 balls over the last 2 seasons at Colorado State University after transferring from Cal. He's an intriguing size, athleticism, developmental flyer who probably should have been drafted, end quote." So it's a good synopsis summary of Chigozie Anusiem. And at the end of the day, what you're going to see here is a 6'1", 200-pound corner. He's a perimeter corner. He's a big, strong outside corner. Now, typically when you hear a cornerback described as big and strong, what that also means is he's a little bit slow, doesn't have top end speed. And I think that in today's NFL, that's probably why he went undrafted. I think that a lot of teams are intrigued by his ability that they see with that length and with that, instinctual type of play that they do see from him on tape. And they like his size and his tackling ability and all those things. But you do get concerned sometimes, especially in today's world of heavy blitzing. More and more teams are moving to kind of single high safety coverage looks where you do have your corners kind of on an island by themselves. If they do get help over the top in single high safety looks, it's typically going to be late. It's not so much that single high safety is there to help break up the pass for the most part. He's there to help corral the ball carrier if they make the catch. So you want a cornerback who can at least hold his own speed-wise, and Chigozie just does not look like the kind of cornerback that's going to necessarily do that. So because of that, someone projected that he could end up as a safety in the National Football League. He might not stick as a perimeter corner. He may end up playing safety where you can get that little bit of a head start, right? Play off the line, do all those things. Also, his ball skills are kind of questionable, right? He only has 1 career interception. That 1 career interception was kind of it was an overthrow and really kind of just fell into Chigozie's lap. You know what I mean? It wasn't really something where he had to break on it or jump on it or kind of fight a receiver for it. So it was also the type of interception that, you just have to be in the right place at the right time to make that kind of a play. Very little experience in the slot. So he's not going to get any burn there in the NFL. Wouldn't expect. Looks most comfortable to me in zone, which makes sense if you're talking about a guy who's not necessarily a speed demon. He's more comfortable when he's backpedaling, when he has eyes on the quarterback. But in that vein, when he's able to keep his eyes on the quarterback and able to kind of, feel for the receiver and stick with him in his back pocket and all that stuff, he's got a very clean break, very clean moves on the ball, does break up a good amount of passes, and he's a very solid tackler. Like when you watch him on tape and he's attacking the ball carrier, whether it's a receiver coming back on a dig or a running back stretching it out wide, he's a very solid tackler. And then those special teams contributions should be able to help as well. And again, when you look at the state that the Washington Commanders are in this year specifically with this new regime and the new GM and the head coach and the amount of roster turnover they've had, nearly 50% turnover of the roster, over 40%, almost 50%. This is an opportunity. And I think that with Chigozie, not only, the $350,000 guaranteed helps him pick Washington, but you also look at the depth chart, right? And I think Benjamin St-Juste and Emmanuel Forbes, I think surely have roster spots, locked down. I don't think either of them is getting cut or traded during the preseason or training camp or anything like that. I think Michael Davis, the free agent that came over, is probably pretty secure that he's going to earn a roster spot. But after that, I don't know that anybody really can stand there and say, I have a claim on a roster spot and it's going to be in mine on the perimeter, right? I think that you have some inside guys, Quan Martin, obviously Mike Sanders still is not going anywhere. So you have those 2 guys, but on the perimeter, I think there's at least one more spot kind of up for grabs. And that is where Chigozie Anusiem, if he comes in maybe plays faster than we expected to see him play, judging from his college tape, perhaps he can carve out a role for himself on this Washington Commanders defense under defense coordinator Joe Witt Jr. So I think he's the best guy. I think if there's one guy, and that's what Insider Merle was asking me, who's the one guy you think has the best chance to make the active roster? If there's one guy, I think it's Chigozie Anusiem, cornerback out of Colorado State. But there's two other guys I want to look at. And the next one is safety Tyler Owens out of Texas Tech. He was Thor's number 237th ranked player. And Thor said of him, quote, speaking of size / athleticism freaks, safety Tyler Owens is one of the fastest 210 plus pound humans walking the earth. And he was 1 inch shy of the NFL's combine's broad jump record. But his technique and instincts need work on the field, and the latter inarguably needs more work off of it. At the NFL Combine, Owens told reporters that he doesn't, quote unquote, believe in space or, quote unquote, other planets, adding, quote, I started seeing flat earth stuff and I was like, this is kind of interesting, quote, I promise I'm not making these quotes up, end quote, from Thor. So, and if you pay attention to the NFL Scouting Combine, you probably remember when Tyler Owens told, the media scrum that he doesn't necessarily believe in space, doesn't believe in other planets, thinks that the world is flat and all those other things. And a lot of people laughed at him. A lot of people, look, whatever you believe is whatever you believe. But at the end of the day, we're more concerned about him as a football player than we are, his beliefs about space and all that stuff. Tyler Owens was a free safety at Texas Tech. He also played 174 snaps in the slot, according to PFF in 2023. So that's interesting and something that could appeal to the Washington Commanders. Again, like Anusiem, only has one career interception, spent 3 years at Texas before transferring to Texas Tech for his last 2 years. He's 6'2", 216 pounds. He does have a lot of mental errors on tape, and that is something that obviously the coaches are going to want to work on and figure out. Is it the player either not locking in, not paying attention, not grasping what his responsibilities are, or is it just, a situation where he just needs to be taught better? Special teams ace is now he's going to make his way on the roster. Basically, think Jeremy Reeves. That's Tyler Owens. Tyler Owens' path to the NFL, Tyler Owens' path to the NFL playing field is basically the same route that Jeremy Reeves has had to take and has done fairly well doing so, in my opinion. So Tyler Owens is another one to watch, but I got one more guy to watch. And then, of course, we got a couple other UDFAs that are certainly interesting that we're going to talk about here in just a second on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. But before we get to that, we got to pause here to talk more about Monoply Go. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by Monoply Go. And I know we've been talking about Monoply Go now for a couple of weeks, but in Monoply Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. And is not every football fan a fan of teamwork, right? The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much that you can get together. Unique stickers. They've got cool new playing pieces that you can travel all the various boards with, hilarious emojis that you can then use to then taunt your friends when you're no longer working together and when you're smashing their buildings and heisting their vaults. Plus, Monoply Go feels new and exciting every single day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monoply Go. So get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders, talking about undrafted free agents who have, again, like I put it, better than normal odds of making the Washington Commanders active roster. The Washington Commanders UDFA class ranked number 6 overall by Thor Nystrom of Fantasy Pros. And the final one that we're going to talk about, and this is the one I already kind of told you that I acknowledge might be a little bit of a reach, might be a little bit of a hot take, but I'm looking at fullback Colson Yankoff. And fullback is kind of a general term, right? So obviously, again, another special teams guy, another guy who's going to have to make his money to start on special teams, showing that pursuit ability, doing all that stuff. But what really intrigues me about Colson Yankoff, Colson is from Idaho, was a quarterback in high school at Idaho, was recruited to Washington to play for the Washington Huskies as a quarterback. Eventually transferred out of Washington, ended up in UCLA, transitioned from quarterback to running back, did some receiver stuff, some tight end stuff. Like, he's just, like, honestly, guys, what he reminds me of is Taysom Hill, to be quite honest with you. He reminds me of Taysom Hill. And I know that a lot of times people don't like gimmicks and they don't like seeing teams copy other teams' gimmicks, and how successful really was Taysom Hill in the New Orleans Saints gimmick and all that stuff. But not so much the Taysom Hill thing, but I go back to hearing Adam Peters and these guys talk about drafting Ben Sinnott out of Kansas State and how much they talked about Kyle Juszczyk. And I look at Colson Yankoff, and I don't see Kyle Juszczyk when I look at Colson Yankoff, right? But I think when you combine Colson Yankoff and Ben Sinnott, what's really interesting is I have this kind of image in my head of Cliff Kingsbury, the air raid king, and the guy who's just known for pass. And again, we've talked about this every day, as you already know, like going back to his time with the Arizona Cardinals, when he had the opportunity to run the ball a lot, he took that opportunity. So I just look at this and I think Colson Yankoff on the field lined up as a fullback, Brian Robinson or Austin Eckler lined up as a running back, Ben Sinnott as a tight end. I mean, that is a defensive nightmare because you either run Yankoff and Sinnott to the same side and you run a running back behind them and you basically just have two kind of road plow type of guys. And Yankoff, look, he's not, the greatest blocking guy out of the backfield, so I don't want to get too crazy with it, but there's some potential there, right? And you have kind of a road grading ability to kind of just carve the path out for your running back, or you go play action, you roll your quarterback, Jaden Daniels, the opposite direction, but your defense, you put Sinnott, Yankoff lined up to the left side of the offensive formation. The defense has got to respect that. They've got to roll that way. You hit the play action. Now you get Jaden Daniels moving back to his right, and you've got either space or you've got openings in the secondary. Like it just kind of dances in my head as a very creative opportunity. So Colson Yankoff is a guy that, if for anything else, just the mix of his experiences as a player in the college level, the fact that, programs like this isn't a guy who flamed out of Washington and ended up at Appalachian State or anything like that. He went from Washington to UCLA. These are two big time programs that brought him in. There's a reason that he stuck around these big time programs as long as he did. So I'm just very intrigued by him. And I'm really looking forward to seeing him on the field on Friday. Outside of those three guys, obviously quarterback Sam Hartman out of Notre Dame is an intriguing player, and everybody's going to have their eyes on him and all those things. I don't know how realistic it is that he lands on the active roster. I think it's more likely that he ends up on the practice squad. And then wide receiver Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint. Again, you just look at the wide receiver situation in Washington, especially in the depth. And you just look at the status of guys like De'Ami Brown, Dax Milne, you know what I mean? Mitchell Tinsley, we'll see if he can take another step forward, things like that. I just feel like this is an opportunity for Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint to potentially show some stuff on special teams and maybe secure himself a roster spot. Again, better than normal odds. UDFAs don't have great odds to make rosters in the first place, but I think better than normal. Again, Chigozie Anusiem out of Colorado State is the number one guy. If not for anything, I mean, look, if the Washington Commanders aren't going to put him on the active roster, they might as well try to trade him for a 7th round pick to somebody, because again, Tom Pelissero of NFL.com reporting that over half the league wanted him as a UDFA when he wasn't drafted. If you try to put him on the practice squad, he's going to get snatched up. Someone's going to pick him up and steal him from you. So if you don't put him on the active roster, then you really don't have anything to do but trade him. So those are three guys, a couple of others. Sam Hartman, the quarterback out of Notre Dame, Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, the receiver out of Georgia, I think are also interesting to watch, but you never know. You know what I mean? There are UDFAs all the time that are surprising the league and talent evaluators and all that stuff. So you never know. Let me know who your favorites are if I didn't talk about them already. Let me know what you think about the guys that we did talk about. Coming up tomorrow, we'll have more. We'll have another episode of Locked On Commanders as we get ahead, as we get prepared for Friday's rookie minicamp. In the meantime, if you got questions or comments, just throw them in the YouTube comments section or text me directly as a Locked On Commanders insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Don't forget to check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 live stream sports channel on YouTube. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day. Thanks for coming through on a regular basis like you do. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I'll see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.